All right, let's get this feedback session started for our survey on innovation and entrepreneurship. Now for the executive summary, what we found was that people felt like they had the ability to innovate. They felt like they could use more support from the organization, and they didn't feel like the innovation supported or really promoted innovation to the level that they might be looking for. Now, we used the McKinsey 7S model for the survey, and we'll get into that a little bit later. The lowest scoring items were strategy and structure, and the highest scoring items were skills and shared values. Now, some of the major themes that we found through some of the answers, especially the open-ended answers, were themes of inclusion, empowerment, and focus. Now, as far as participation goes, we were going for a census. The team included 20 members. We got 14 responses from the 20 invitations. That was a 70% response rate. The survey was really designed, and the goal was really to assess the organization's readiness and ability to move in a more innovative direction. Now, we ended up having only a 70% response rate, and there were some things that might be questioned because of that. One of them just might be who responded, and how thorough the results were. Although, for the time given, since this was for a class and we had limited time, a 70% response rate is great. If we had a more standard time to be able to do the survey, potentially over a month or even 2 months, I'm sure we would have gotten the entire census we were looking for. And the survey was available for 8 days, and then it was surveyed over the following week. So it was available from Sunday to Sunday, and then it was analyzed over the following week to come up with the results. Now, as far as the preliminary research, we conducted interviews with the C-level executive team. There was a consensus that they felt in order to be competitive as an organization moving forward, they needed to find ways to innovate and provide value to the marketplace. And one idea was to survey the organization to see if the talent and structure was already there to support greater innovation, or if new talent or organizational structure was needed to execute on that vision. Now, the survey was piloted to my classmates for review, and after having the survey reviewed by my class, a number of changes were made. Some of the changes were changing the wording in the opening text to sound less like a research study, making sure the survey instructions didn't mention being able to skip questions, as you're not able to skip questions, adding a question about the reporting relationships, adding a question about the organization's risk tolerance, and adding a question about being able to learn from failure, also changing the wording of the questions related to values leading to innovation. Now, the model we used was the McKinsey 7S model, and it's a model familiar to the organization. We used it because the organization was already familiar with the model, uses the model for some of its internal development and a lot of its guidance and direction already. And one of the great aspects of the McKinsey 7S model is it puts an emphasis on the human resources, like some of the more soft things, rather than the traditional tangibles of capital, infrastructure, and equipment. And that's really what we were trying to survey here, was to survey the people and what they were willing and able to do. As far as the methodology, the survey was administered individually to the employees through their email accounts. It was uploaded in Qualtrics, and that gives greater privacy for the respondent and autonomy as to when and where to respond. And it also gives them the individual choice whether to respond or not, which accounts for our response rate. Now, the design of the instrument was mostly by me, but also with input from the CEO and a C-level support team. The survey was administered by me, and it was created and uploaded online in Qualtrics. We ended up with a 70% response rate, and the team was told about the survey as a group face-to-face. They were then sent an email to the survey once the survey was open. Now onto the results. So here's where we have the survey results. You can see the 7 categories from the McKinsey 7S model are presented here, and they're ranked from highest scoring to lowest scoring. For the scoring, you can see all the standard scores, the minimum, the maximum, as far as what the responses were, the mean, standard deviation, and variance here. For the total, what I did was I gave each response a score, and then I totaled up the responses in each category through the 3 questions. And so you'll see what I analyzed and what I compared things to moving forward was I compared the answer total score to the mean total score for the answers, and it just made it a lot more apparent to me what was going on. It just gave me larger numbers to look at so that I could see just greater discrepancies and just to see the data in kind of a different light. So I hope that works well for you. Now what you're going to see, we'll start off with structure. Structure was ranked 7 of 7. You'll see the mean score here for the total, and what people really felt is they felt they were least agreeable about having the autonomy to innovate in their role, and that's this question right here. Also, that management drives innovation and passes it down to them, which kind of hits on the same theme, that they're not really innovating and that management is doing the innovating and passing it down to them for them to just go ahead and do it. They did feel that the relationships supported innovation, just not that they had the autonomy to be able to do so. Now, as far as strategy, that was second to last, and respondents were least agreeable about the organization valuing creativity and innovation. You can see that's this question here. They just really didn't feel like the value shone through. They felt like their work encouraged innovation and that they had the ability and that they were personally encouraged to do so, but they didn't feel that the organization valued it. Now, as far as the staff, this was third to last. Respondents were least agreeable about the organization's expectations and performance measures driving innovation, and that's what you see here. These were actually fairly tightly grouped, which was nice to see, but this was the outlier in that category. Now, as far as style was really smack dab in the middle, and the respondents were least agreeable about the organization celebrating and giving recognition for creative problem solving and innovation, and that's this question here as related to the mean score. Now, you'll see here in systems, respondents were least agreeable about the organization's processes and procedures allowing for innovation and for creative problem solving. As this question here is related to the overall category score. Shared values, this was second to the top, and you'll see respondents were least agreeable about the organization adjusting and learning from its mistakes. That's this question here as related to the mean score. And in skills, you'll find that respondents were least agreeable about their ability to anticipate industry trends, and that's this here as related to the mean. And this category was the top. So they felt very comfortable across the board with their skills, but if any skill could be improved, it's the ability to anticipate industry trends. Now, for the qualitative questions, that's actually really interesting. They were analyzed by reading the response and then categorizing the response based on the type of question answered. Some of the questions had simple categories like positive, negative, or neutral, and others were categorized differently, like using the model categories from the McKinsey 7S model. So what you'll see here is the first question was about the thoughts on the organizational culture in terms of innovation. And this was 64% negative. What really stood out were just strategy and structure in terms of the category the responses fell into. And the selected comment was the culture is negative and micromanaged to the point where innovation is needed but discouraged. And I highlighted this comment just because it stood out to me, especially when you're talking about trying to drive or move in an area or direction of innovation, but you have people feeling micromanaged. It's definitely something where you're moving, where they feel like you're talking in two directions, and it needs to be addressed. Now, the other question here was what could be done to make the culture more innovative? And here we see themes of inclusion and focus. The selected comment here was to delegate more tasks to employees and ask for their feedback on current processes. Another open-ended question was how do you feel about taking risks in your career, which was 57% neutral. And neutral is lukewarm. I mean, it's not hot, it's cold, or it's not hot or cold, it's more room temperature. One of the selected comments was not something that I consciously pursue. I'm open to it when the opportunity arises. If you want a more innovative organization, you want people to be more enthusiastic about taking risks, and we'll talk about that here in the recommendations. Also, what behaviors, policies, procedures, or processes could better support an innovative culture? The themes here were empowerment, inclusion, and focus. And to highlight that, the selected comment was inclusion, encouragement, willingness to fail, understanding and learning from experience, listening to good ideas no matter who makes them, which I think is a very powerful comment. It really sums up what we're about to dive into right now, which is the recommendations. So looking at each category here as far as recommendations, the recommendation here to improve structure is to increase autonomy within each role, to give each person a little bit more ability to creatively problem solve, even if that requires them to check with management or to work with management. You want to get people included and feeling more included in the creative and the problem-solving area. That's going to spur more creativity, and it's going to make them feel more included and thus encouraged to add this to what they're currently doing. Now, as far as strategy, you want to build a culture around innovation, and that can also be included through inclusion, through making it something that is talked about, something that is recognized, something that is celebrated. As far as the staff, you want to include innovation with performance and supporting measured risk-taking, and this is huge. So if people are being asked to innovate, but they're not being scored or graded on, if it's not part of their scorecard, it's not part of the performance review, the question is why. So if they're looking, you want to have both the carrot and the stick, and I don't like to phrase it that way, but people need to know that it's important. Again, if you want something included, but it's not in the syllabus and it's not on the final, how important is it going to be in the minds of those who are looking at those measures and what they're measured against? And then also, as far as measured risk taking, this goes back a little bit into strategy and structure, but also into staff. Like, you want to empower people to be able to take risks. So you want to make sure that they feel like they have the ability to do it, and it's not going to be solely on them if they fail. As far as style, you want to encourage and recognize innovation and creative problem solving. And that has a lot to do with management. It has a lot to do with how things are recognized, how rewards are given, and how incentives are in the organization. You want to look at the systems by auditing processes and removing obstacles to innovation. In the results, you found that people felt like they had the ability to innovate, but they were being micromanaged, and this really comes back down to micromanagement. And also, your standard operating procedures. If you want people to innovate, but then the rules or the processes don't allow innovation, and they didn't feel like they didn't, but that micromanagement did come into vogue, so I kind of put that in there. The shared values, so you want to be able to share wins and lessons learned. One thing that came up was they didn't feel like the organization learned from its mistakes. So you can add this to shared values by celebrating the wins as a group, and then also going around and talking about the lessons learned, just to make sure, and this also reinforces the measured risk taking, that even if a risk doesn't work out, you can learn something so that you're better off with the next risk you take. It kind of gives people allows them to feel more supported in their risk taking. And then as far as skills was on top, but you can still support the skills with training and informal team building. And by informal team building, what I mean is the thing that was highlighted in skills was the ability to anticipate trends. I don't know how to train for that. But what I do know, and what I have seen work, is building informal teams around people that have an intangible skill like that, and then to start to have people learn from that individual the things that they do and how they think about it. It's more of a mindset transfer. And if you can start to have that happening, you're going to start to see some common themes across the board when teaching that skill, and then you can start to bring those into processes and start to train with what you learn. And then here are some of the references. I'll let you guys go through those as well, and I think I will also include some other materials so you can go through it. But that's the end of the breakdown.